Welcome to Curating Tools, a podcast which explores the practical aspects of curatorial work. Through conversations with some of the most prolific curators and art professionals in the creative sector, we aim to provide you with tools and advice to help you develop your curatorial practice. This podcast is brought to you by Call for Curators, a platform promoting professional opportunities since 2012, and Node Center for Curatorial Studies, the first e-learning platform for curators and art professionals founded in 2009. In this episode, my guest is Marco Mancuso, a critic and curator of contemporary art in the relationship with technology and science and in the dialogue with the fields of design, architecture, and sound. He is the founder and director of the Digicult project, a full professor at the Carrara Academy of Fine Arts in Bergamo, adjunct professor at the Alma Mater University of Bologna, and visiting professor at the Node Center for Curatorial Studies in Berlin. PhD in Digital Cultures at the University of Venice, and he is interested in how the interdisciplinary discourse investigates the ways in which technoscience influences culture, society, and the relationship between human beings and the context, observing the evolution of production, research, and market of media art and digital art. In this episode, we focused on discussing new technologies, including artificial intelligence, and ways of working with them for cultural practitioners. So last time we started with discussing your upcoming book and the process of editing it. Could you just kind of tell me a little bit about the book and what the content of your book that's kind of based on your PhD?
It is based on my PhD research that ended the last year. So it took 1 year, to transform the PhD research, which is, as a PhD research, it's a PhD thesis, so it's very heavy in a way. It's not for, probably it's not interesting for everyone. You need to transform it in something more readable, for a general audience. So it's a long process. And the research is focused on the human body. It's really focused on the human body and the embodiment of the technoscientific research in terms of the last developments, of course, related both to the technological part and the scientific part. So it means what is concerned to prosthesis and body hacking and the neurosciences and artificial intelligence, but also to something more related to biotechnologies, and so how the technoscience is going closer and closer, to the human body, touching the human body, and also penetrating the human body itself, changing this idea of the natural realm of the human body, changing and challenging the natural inside of the human body, transforming it more and more in something more artificial. That's something, of course, that is not new, which was which is the idea that I have been developing since a while. But I'm not the only one, of course. That's a part of a wider research made by critics or intellectuals more in general. Is that how this impact and this penetration is changing not only and not simply the natural part of our biology, but how it is changing the way in which the human body and, of course, the human beings are interacting and having a conversation, I can say, with the environment around. I'm very interested in this kind of relationship, how it has having an impact and changing the way in which we relate with the environment in which we are living. And when I talk about the environment, I'm interested not only and simply in the natural environment, but I'm interested in a sort of an ontology in which natural and artificial, also in terms of the environment, is developing. So in terms of how we are changing the way in which we relate with other human beings, of course, first of all, but also with the other natural species and also with the objects. So what is considered as the unliving and as the different, but at the same time is having a more and more agency, of course, in our life and in the way in which we relate again, with the environment around. And the thesis, of course, is based on how the artists or some artists are researching, okay, in this direction, and are developing researches and languages and new narratives, and of course also artifacts that focus exactly on this idea, with a strong, very strong and deep philosophical and ethical approach to the subject, which is important, of course, in the days in which we are living, in terms of having a new, less anthropocentric approach to our life and the way in which we relate, with the planet in which we are living. And so in terms of a no hierarchical kind of relationship with all our surroundings. So the ethical and philosophical part of the thesis and the book, it's absolutely important, okay? So you have to imagine like really a sort of an ontology in which I use the artist, I relate with some artists that are researching and developing in this direction, and how they are suggesting new ways to, or new possibilities for the human beings to relate in more ethical and not hierarchical ways with the environment in which they're living.
In terms of thinking about other intelligences than human intelligence, we're thinking about AI kind of in this conversation as well. How does this notion and kind of the ethical considerations apply to working with AI? As someone who is a critic who works with artists and in this area, what are the kind of ethical considerations that you think when working with this topic?
Yeah, I can tell you, when I usually have conferences, lectures, roundtables, and also, of course, in my educational activities, the one related to the Node, for example, the course that I have there, but also in the university and the academy in which I teach, I can tell you, this kind of conversations are fortunately, more and more common in a way. I have, feedbacks, okay, from the people I meet, and the colleagues of mine, of course, but also in the general audience and in my students. I have more and more conversations related to, it's a sort of a double path, okay, I can say, because of course, on one side, we have technologies that are continuously developing, okay, and as you know, I've been around since a while. I started digital in 2005, so and I was involved, of course, in the field since some years before. So we are talking about a 25, basically, year experience, and in this last 25 years, I have the same feedbacks. Okay, in a way, I'm observing in a way the same trends. When since the internet, since the social media, since the interactive technologies, since the generative softwares, and it's always the same in a way. When a new technology comes, and or the blockchains, of course, when a new technology comes, it has especially those technologies that have a great impact, okay, on the society in which we live. There is always the same behaviors, from people in general, and I have, of course, I'm including myself. On one side, it is we are fascinated by the new possibilities given by that specific technology, and on the other side, we start reflecting, of course, on how these technologies can have, a sort of a negative impact, or critic impact on the society in which we live and on our everyday life, and challenging, of course, also what we are as human beings and how we relate again with our surroundings. And of course, artificial intelligence is slightly something different in a way, because we consider, and we are starting considering more and more the possibilities that machines, computers, or computational technologies are becoming in a way quote intelligent, of course. And so that's challenging a lot this idea of being artificial and being natural, and artificial at the same time, not only ourselves, but of course also, the things, the object, and of course also the other species that which we relate with. And of course, the artists use these technologies. That's quite obvious, okay, in a way, because they are potential in terms of computational capacities. And so when there is a new technology, especially so impressive and so powerful from a purely computational point of view, artists are interested to work with. It's a tool in a way. So they explore, they make experience, they, experiment in a way. They try to find new, also aesthetical and formal possibilities in terms of visual outputs, of course, not only visual, but of course also audio outputs as well. And so they experiment, they try to find new possibilities, new narratives, as I told you. And the contemporary art system, of course, is interested as well, and is fascinated as well, maybe for other reasons, more related to economical reasons, maybe. But I mean, it's an environment, it's a cultural environment that, of course, change, grow, develop. And if I remember 20, 25 years ago, I mean, the media art field in which I have been working since was not so well known, was not so culturally spreaded. Was a sort of a niche of a niche of a niche, while the artist and myself and all this media art system, of course, grow up. And now we are at the center of the spotlight, of course, because we have been doing this kind of researches since a while. And suddenly, also the general audience is understanding how technologies are important, how much are important, of course, in our everyday life. But at the same time, the kind of critic and curator and professor that I am, of course, I'm not the only one. I'm very, very interested also in the ethical, philosophical impact of these technologies and the possible biases and problems that, of course, pop up according, to exactly to the impact, to the deep impact that these technologies are having in our life. And of course, there are some artists that are maybe more interested in this part of the conversations instead of paying attention only to the aesthetical and formal possibility by the technology itself. Me, as a critic, in my opinion, being a critic is like being objective. Of course, when I talk, as I'm talking to you in this moment, I can tell you that I'm more interested in the second part of the research, the one that's having ethical and philosophical meaning more than the purely aesthetical and formal research, which is sometimes a man that is changing fastly and so on. But at the same time, when I write or when I teach, I must be objective, and I consider as an important responsibility to give to the people the whole scenario, which is, of course, important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a very important distinction that you made between kind of thinking about new technologies from a purely aesthetic point of view, which I guess is also determined partially by these technologies and limited by them as well, and thinking more broadly through the social and economic point of view, and more critically about the way people and artists engage with these new technologies. But I also found it very interesting when you mentioned kind of AI in the same context as social media and as technologies that have been emerging and being made public in the last 20 years. That it made me think about that perhaps every new technology goes through the cycle of kind of hype of the cycle when it becomes first widely adopted and a lot of people are excited about it, and then goes for a period where it's being it's kind of being scrutinized and put under more critical eye,
which I guess kind of also happened with social media, where the users were, at least kind of a general public, was less suspicious of social media and using it less critically. The new technologies, they emerge, and there's a need to kind of critically engage with them. But in terms of how you mentioned new languages, kind of visual languages aesthetically, but they do also provide new forms of knowledge, like you said, even kind of rewinding back to your book, and the new knowledges and kind of ways of learning that emerge with AI.
I agree with you. I think, sorry to interrupt you, and because I think this is a very important part of my, I feel, okay, as an important part of what I have been doing today, basically. I mean, I remember when I started 25 years ago, I mean, I was, in a way, the first one that probably was, in a way, interested or more interested in the technology itself, okay, and how a specific technology could be a new tool, in a way, a new possibility in terms of, again, research, languages, aesthetics, formal experimentation. So, in a way, in the output itself, okay, and how these new aesthetic and formal languages were developing. But I changed, and I think it's natural in a way. But I've been changing, okay, since probably the last 10 years. And I really feel, the importance of being what I am in terms of an art critic, curator, and educator. I think I feel more and more, okay, the responsibility of what I'm doing in terms of, because I'm not a creator, to work, okay, and to study and to be closer and closer to those kind of artists that use their languages and their researches to develop an ethical and critical consciousness in the people, okay, in the general audience. Of course, they use their art sensibility, and I cannot make the same because I'm not an artist. What I can do is to try to create bridges, okay, and to develop a critical discourse together with them, working with them, using quotes them to, create a wider critical discourse that I can also share with other people that maybe are not so much and deep involved in technoscience and in this kind of artistic language. And I feel as a great responsibility.
And yeah, I wanted to ask you in your role, if you can tell us a little bit more about kind of how you became a critic and kind of what that involved because I think that can be also interesting for people who are listening, for curators. A lot of writing or criticism is a part of curatorial practice and many aspects. But you founded Digicult, which is a fantastic platform in English and in Italian. It is focused on art and technology, on media art. So if you can kind of walk us a little bit through the beginnings and what were your motivations for, sharing your work?
I have personally speaking, I have a weird, in a way, background but it's interesting because nowadays it's not so weird anymore. But I have a degree, is a scientific degree. Okay, I have a chemistry degree. I remember when I started 25 years ago. That's got really weird in a way, and we are talking about, how the art system is considered, and at the end is still considering, people that are not properly out trained in a way. And but being more and more involved in technoscience, it changed. Okay, the general perception has changed. And of course, I mean, I'm talking about Italy, of course, the country in which I was born, in which I've been working since, and in which I live. This kind of, I can say, academic separations, discipline separations are quite strong. I don't know, of course, in other countries in the world, I have been experiences, I mean, the north part of America and the North America and Europe, and this kind of distinctions are a little bit smoother, I can say, when in Italy are quite strong still today. But at the same time, I started to be more and more involved, in these new technologies that popped up. Think about the internet and think about basically internet and interactive technologies, and being involved personally in the artistic scene, both in Italy and in Europe mainly. I was more and more interested in having the idea to start a project by my own. And this is the reason why in 2005 I studied digital online, and because I was studying by myself. I have a DIY, I can say, background, in the media art system, coming, from a scientific degree. So I had, I can say, a slightly different point of view, okay, to the subject itself. I was always interested in how technologies and science was important, okay, in the critical and cultural discourse. That, of course, coming back to the beginning of the new millennia, were really and fastly, okay, changing. So I decided to start this project by my own, without any investment, without any institutional support, without any academy or university or any kind of institution behind supporting the project itself. So it was really open in a way, and completely independent. And what was interesting is that it started because I was interested in that. Okay, it was my pressure to do something fresh. The idea of a wide network, okay, connecting, I can say, a new generation of people that started in those years to be more and more interested in the general impact of technologies and science on contemporary art and design, and music and performance. So to have a transdisciplinary project, absolutely open, horizontal, putting this idea of a network, okay, at the center, was not only, I found out it was not only, my need, but probably was the need of a new generation, basically, of people like me that started to have interest in this subject and didn't have many other chances to be connected, and many other online editorial and cultural projects to be part of. Of course, there were some historically, and probably also more important than digital. But I mean, digital was very, very networking, and that was really the reason why that project started and exploded basically worldwide, and is still running today after 20 years basically, and 18 years. So that's the reason why digital started, and that's the reason, in my opinion, why digital spread and developed and is still running today.
It made me think that, perhaps it's a platform like Digicult is like a proto-social network platform, because you mentioned it's. I mean, you mentioned networking being at the heart of it, and kind of the need to connect with other individuals or other people who also were interested in topics relating to media or to the new landscapes of technologies. You mentioned that Digicult didn't have any institutional support. It was kind of a passion project for you that turned into a very big platform that's well known all around the world today. But was there an institutional interest in these topics when you started, or was this kind of, did you see that the interests were shifting slightly towards new technologies in the contemporary art landscape? Yeah, was there a big change and you kind of responded to it, or are you really filling in the gap that was like a niche that wasn't explored at all?
Nowadays we are experiencing, I can say sometimes it seems like another word, okay, since the world in which we started 20 years ago, basically. It is really completely another world. Frankly speaking, 20 years ago, basically no institution, and I can say few institutions, but worldwide. Okay, I'm not talking about my country. In my country, probably no institution at all were interested in new technologies 20 years ago. But I'm talking about, internationally, few institutions were interested in that. I don't know. Whitney Museum, for example, were one of the first that started to be interested in. Just to make an example, okay, started since the beginning to be interested in these new languages and related also to Ryzen and the Whitney Museum art board, or the NetArt and Ryzen Art Base first and NetArt Anthology project by Ryzen after that. I mean, there were very, very few institutions that were interested in the field. And of course, also the contemporary art market basically were absolutely not interested in digital technologies because of many reasons, related to the needs, of course, of the contemporary art market itself. Few galleries. In a way, absolutely fascinating, because we're, in a way, I can feel more free or more spontaneous in a way. It was very fascinating, really new, okay, really fresh, really new. And after 20 years, I can tell you, fortunately, I'm not one of those guys that say, the past was better than the present. Yesterday was better. It doesn't work like that. I never been a kind of person like that. That's fortunately, I can say things are changed and have been changing. And it's always a matter, as I told you before, it's always a matter of the cultural scenario in which we live and how, something that were new 20 years ago is not new anymore, of course. And it's being part more and more for our life, having a deeper and stronger impact, okay, of our society. And of course, computers developed, technologies developed, internet changed a lot. Softwares became more competitive and powerful, of course, and now artificial intelligences, and of course, new tools, new aesthetics, new languages developed and are being more and more accepted in a way by the contemporary art system. And also this idea that digital artists are only digital, that were false 20 years ago, of course, is also changing. So it's because they create also physical objects. And so this rebalance, I can say, and this overlap between the digital and the physical one is changing and is being more and more accepted. But first of all, from a cultural point of view, when culturally society accepts what is different, of course, things change for everything. And of course, also for the media art languages. Yeah, nowadays there are more and more institutions, big museums, and of course, new galleries are popping up. And if I remember, I don't know, if Bitform Gallery was probably the first gallery that started 20 years ago as well to be the first gallery, or also the Time Gallery, Berlin, the first galleries that were interested in this kind of artists, new artists, and finding new ways also to put these artists on the market and so on. Now, also galleries that were not interested in digital art, in media art, they are focusing, okay, simply including, okay, new exhibitions, new artists in their cultural proposal, and it's fine. It's absolutely good in my opinion.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think it's fantastic that there's kind of more research being done and there's more programs focusing on this. And partially, I also think because it's such a massive social topic right now. It's kind of becoming more to the mainstream, and more people can contribute to this discourse. But I also remember last time when we spoke about this, we talked a little bit about kind of the way that technologies are developing and the corporate sponsorship in the contemporary art landscape. Artists can use these new technologies, but that obviously this progress can cost money, and a lot of the time the sponsorship comes from major corporations. which kind of negates the ethical considerations when talking about technology and working with it. So it's a little bit kind of paradoxical, this relationship between big institutions and technology companies. Kind of, what is kind of your view on that? Like, if the progress needs to be made, kind of, and the research needs to be done. But as someone who's very concerned with the ethics of, and works with artists who are concerned with the ethics, is it really possible to, disassociate yourself?
Yeah. It is absolutely paradox. I can agree with you. It is absolutely paradox because on one side, but it being also talking about, the cultural scenario in terms of festivals or, again, institutions working in the field, and coming down, to the bottom, considering the technology, of course, that we use, and the artificial intelligence systems as well, and the databases behind, and that's ruled and governed in a way at the very end by big corporations in the ICT market and in technological research as well. We use, all of us, a higher percentage of people use Google every day. What we are talking about, in a way, it's, of course, on one side, we are without any hypocrisy. It's impossible to be not hypocritical from talking about these subjects. We use these technologies, and we work, with institutions that, of course, are strictly connected to more and more, to the big companies as well. Think about, I don't know, the last Rafika Nadal exhibition at MoMA, for example, using the digital the translation of their artwork. Many museums in the world work with the Google Creative Lab to have a digitalizations, of course, of their connections, and that's part of the in a way, the world in which we're living. Okay, it's also the story of the blockchain. For example, the blockchain started as a new way, to have a more democratic and horizontal way to relate with the internet and with the connections more in general. They have a very utopian and ethical part, and they still have a very utopian point of view to the use of the technology itself. But the blockchains at the same time, certainly very quickly, were absorbed by the big companies that are used for speculations on the market, not only on the contemporary market. So that's in every side you turn on, there is this kind of hypocrisy, I can say, and it's not possible to avoid it. What is possible to do? Otherwise, you become very, very radical, and the open culture and the DIY attitude becomes really, really, ain't a part of yourself and what you do. But I know very, very few people that are completely coherent from this point of view. What is probably important to do as well is to develop a critical thinking. This is what I really think, to develop a critical thinking. Okay, we have to use these technologies. We cannot avoid. We know many artists and myself that, of course, use these technologies. But at the same time, the way and the kind of researches that you do, you can do without a kind of partners that are not so much involved, in the capitalistic system. You can work with independent labs or researchers. You can decide to work with some kind of artists that share your point of view and try to have a critical impact on the society in which they live. This is, I think, in a way, the only thing and the most important thing that we can do as human beings.
Yeah, I mentioned the kind of hardware and the technologies that we use just on an everyday basis. Also, because as I kind of, as you were talking, I started thinking about the kind of disappearance of the DIY and hacktivism specialists, like artists who were working and with like this, also physically dismantling technologies and opening them up. But there are artists, like you mentioned, this kind of translates into a more critical approach to the research and to the work that the artists do. And we kind of mentioned the biases that are in AI or in technologies in general. And we mentioned a few initiatives that do fantastic work in bringing these out to life, to public life and public eye. Are there kind of some artists that are inspiring to you in the work that they do, in the critical work they did do, that maybe you'd like to share? And we can.
There should be a really long list in a way, and we should spend probably some time, to talk. Probably we need another episode of the podcast, to go deep, inside how many interesting projects there are that critically focus and try to develop, a critical ethical discourse around technologies and specifically, of course, artificial intelligences. Because, this story about artificial intelligence, it sounds like, a new step, in the stairway in a way. It's like, it's a new step, okay? It's growing up.
Absolutely. But also, I think you mentioned a few organizations such as Rhizome or, the Whitney kind of starting a program of online and digital art quite early on.
Absolutely.
The NetArt Anthology from Rhizome. These are also fantastic places to start and kind of work your way to the present
day. Absolutely. I usually use, this important projects, for my students, and to say, okay, we don't have time enough, even in a course, you never have time enough. It's a too long story to tell. And okay, but I mean, you have some references online that you can use by yourself. I'm really a fan, of those people and students that, develop also their own discourse. It's important to give some keystone milestone, to pave the road of a critical consciousness that people needs to develop by itself. And I'm not talking only about students, but I'm also talking about, general people, even those people that are not properly deep inside the subject. And those two examples that I gave you and you recall, they are very, very important, but also in terms of, curatorial project, very interesting curatorial project. Like I mentioned, the Broken Timeline, curated by Annette Decker with Dedon and Maria Laura Ghidini. That's also an incredible reference online. So complete, it's really the history of the most interesting and challenging exhibition happening online and or related, to NetArt projects. That it's a really important resource, and there are so many, online. And on the other side, also considering some platforms, that are developing interesting conversation and discourses around impact, for example, of the blockchains, considering, blockchainscommons.com, or even artificial intelligence. I'm thinking about, AI for Good, and or the Algorithmic Justice League created by Joe Bulamini. These are important references that people can find online, and that I consider also important to spread and to talk about, in conferences that I lead, or in lectures, or of course in my educational activities.
Thank you so much. I think these are fantastic, examples, and that we will also include with the podcast. So, with the podcast on our channels, so people can follow them and explore. I kind of, I realize there's just so much, and there are really fantastic projects out there and fantastic artists, and it is important that everyone kind of finds their own sort of niche and their own preference. But I think also, like what we mentioned earlier about the big corporations and using Google every day, and because of this relationship with tech corporation, I think it is a little bit tricky sometimes to find these quality resources online, even because the more and more prominent in the public discourse AI is, the more kind of non-critical thought there will be about it, and the more non-critical resources will be, or less critical resources will be shared. So coming from an expert like yourself, these examples are really, really valuable for us to share with everyone. But thank you very much for this conversation about AI and art and technologies and more general as well. Really a pleasure.